Good morning.
Except he's not here.
We have a special meeting this morning. Good morning to my colleagues. Good morning to those of you visiting us. It's good to see you all. I have been out for the last couple of meetings. I may not make it through this whole meeting, so about an hour in I may leave, so do not be offended. I am not, you know I love budgets. I love budgets more than anything in the world. But if I leave in about an hour and don't be offended. So we have an agenda which should be in front of my colleagues. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda order?
I don't see it. Wait 1 minute.
So moved, and let me say before we get started that I think I speak for all of us that we are very happy to see you back.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll second both of those.
Be rid of that dauber
Exactly. All in favor of the agenda order? Aye. Okay, good, great, glad to hear it. Let's see, we have, so the one agenda item we have today is to talk about the upcoming year's budget. We also have some speakers, I believe. So do we have speaker cards?
We do have speaker cards.
I don't have any cards in front of me.
Dr. Bowers, maybe you could grab those. I think they're over there, or Mr. Quintana. Thank you. We have some cards that have been filled out, right? Super.
I was thinking we could take the comments up front just in case, and then we can stop some along the way if we have other folks join us.
Great.
Thanks. Lisa Rock, Dicey Hinaga, Tanya Mota, and Cipriana Ramos. Thank you. You have some folks with you might want to introduce?
Yes, I do. First of all, I would just like to say good morning, Dr. McGee and members of the school board. We really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Lisa Rock. I'm the Executive Director of Palo Alto Community Child Care. And today I'm here with some of my colleagues, as well as members of our board, to speak with you about the challenges that PAC faces in continuing to manage the district's child development contract with the state. So through this contract, PAC provides essential child care and education services to over 70 at-risk, low-income children in Palo Alto. These children do not have access to quality preschool or after-school programs without these services. These children are not on a level playing field with their more privileged peers. These are our community's achievement gap kids. So I want to introduce to you now PAC's CFO, Dicey Hinaga, and she's going to talk with you a little more about the budget challenges that PAC faces in managing this contract, as well as the difficult decisions that our board faces in the year to come and years to come. Thank you.
Hello, board. Max. I am the numbers person at PAC.
Can you pull down your mic so we can
There
get
we
you on
go.
tape? Thanks.
And here's some of the numbers. You're going to have a lot of them in the... My name is Dicey Hinaga. So I'm the numbers person at PAC, and you have a lot of numbers in the packet given to you, but I'm going to highlight just a few. The first one are the 70 families that Lisa Rock mentioned that we provide services for. There are another 35 families that we provide for the same services through a fully funded city program, and yet still we have 110 more families on our waiting list who want this care that we provide. The need is really there. The cost of the care that we provide to these families under the CDE contract averages at just under $1 million per year. The state funding right now covered close to 50% of that. When we started, it was at 75%. That gap is growing, and it has been for the last 15 years that we've had this contract. When we started, the daily rate for care that the CDE pays was at $29. That's what they pay for each day of care we provide to these children. It's now increased to $40 per day. That's a net increase of 36%. Minimum wage that we pay to our employees who start over the same time period has risen from $6.25 an hour to $12 an hour, a 92% increase. Healthcare for a family has risen from less than $8,000 a year to over $22,000 a year, or 175% increase over the same 15 years. Our costs are rising significantly, but unfortunately, the funding we receive through the state and through the PAUSD contract has not risen at the same rate. At full enrollment in the program this year, that difference, the minimum difference, will be $420,000. PAC has been funding this gap for a number of years, primarily by not keeping pace with similar providers in the area and offering lower than average pay for our staff, and by increasing tuition for our full fee families. It's creating a cycle that we cannot sustain. We can't sustain full enrollment, and it's causing us to dip into our reserves. It has for the last 2 years, and that's what we're projecting forward if we don't find a way to cover this gap. As we enter our budget season also, our board of directors has started to focus on the continued fiscal health of the agency and our ability to continue providing the services that our community needs. Without additional funding to cover this gap, between the funding that we receive and the actual cost of care, we're really left with only one option. We need to severely curtail the program, reduce the number of families served, or return the program back to the district to manage it. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya Mota?
Hello there. Hi, Board. Dr. McGee. My name is Tanya Mota. I am the site supervisor at Best Bolton Kids Club. It's one of the largest after-school programs of Palo Alto Community Childcare located on Fairmeadow campus. I just want to say first that Palo Alto and the PAUSD mean a lot to me. Some of you may or may not know that I am the granddaughter of Henry Martin Gunn, who one of the high schools was named after. And my kids grew up here. I grew up here. Best Bolton is one, like I said, is one of the after-school programs. We are not just an after-school program. We are a program that supports the whole child. We support them academically, socially, and emotionally. We are one of the few after-school programs that provide childcare for children whose parents qualify for state funding. We serve the same historically underrepresented children from economically challenged backgrounds that you are trying to help in this district. I look at our program as an extension of Fairmeadow. We serve the same children and families as the school. I have a strong working relationship with our principal, Grant Althouse. He and I communicate almost daily about the children and the issues that arise. I attend SSTs and IEPs with the parents regarding their children to support them and give them feedback. In order for the children to succeed, they need support from all the adults around them. I believe we need to work together as a partnership. Academically, we provide homework time to help the children in our program. Our assistance is especially helpful for parents who are uncomfortable with the language or the academics. We realize many parents need us to help them with their homework time because they come home from work and they don't have time to help them with their homework. One of our current third graders started this school year at a first grade reading level. And we have been working with him every day with reading and homework, and today with the help of his teacher and with us, he's now reading closer to grade level, doing his homework unassisted, and is getting 100% on his spelling tests. So we get the privilege of having these kids for 6 years, from kindergarten through 5th grade. We get to see them grow, develop relationships with their peers and adults, and grow academically. We are lucky that we get to talk daily to the parents. The underserved children in our district are the most vulnerable. We need to make sure that we continue to support each of these children in a way we can. It truly takes a community to raise a child. I invite every single one of you to come visit our program and see it in the works and meet the children that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cipriana Ramos, and then Rita Tetzloff.
Good morning. I am the financial aid coordinator for the Palo Alto Community Childcare, and I manage the state contract. So I get to meet these families every day, either in person or over the phone, asking information about the process and what to do to qualify for the financial aid program. I get to meet these children when their families are at a point of dire circumstances. They struggle in a way that I don't think many of us can accept that this happens in our community today. I collaborate really closely with your student services team right across the way. And most recently, we helped a family who had lost everything, their home, their work. This family's children were at a point to where they could no longer attend school. And so we worked so closely together to get this family into the Best Bolton program. And they attended the after-school services, which allowed the family to get back on track. This family found employment, stable housing, and the children got to continue staying at Fair Meadow, where they've been all these years. Seeing the resilience of this family is so humbling to me, because it's only one that I'm sharing with you, but there's so many more. And I've gone through so many tissue boxes with this family because I know that you probably have read some of their letters. And in their letters, they don't share with you probably the detail of their struggles. They don't share with you the detail of the hardships they're trying to overcome. These adversities that these children are forced into is really unfair. And this program is a beacon of hope to them, to the families. It puts them back on track. And to see the success, the outcome of an after-school program or an attendance at a preschool is something that I cannot bear to see go away. I couldn't tell a family, you can't attend this program no more. And I definitely couldn't look at a child's face and tell them that they won't get to be with their friends at school anymore. Usually when I meet them, they haven't had a chance to go to school yet. They're in tow with these parents as these parents are struggling to find housing or work to get their family on track. And the resilience this child shows, that smile that comes on their face when I stoop down and say, guess what? You're gonna go to preschool and Monday's gonna be your first day. So this week you're gonna get to meet your teachers and see, your classmates. And just that excitement, it just brings me joy. And I just know that this contract that you guys have, it does so much. It does more than words can describe. And if you have some time to walk over to Student Services and meet some of the folks over there, they can tell you how many children, we've helped in this year alone.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos. I'm afraid our little buzzer
Okay,
isn't buzzing,
sorry.
but
And I
thank you
just want to
so
thank
much.
you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you.
May I just say a closing comment since I used 1 minute before? Is that okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate that. As you can see, this is a really emotional issue for our team. We connect with these families on a personal level. We've been managing this contract for the school district for the past 15 years to the tune of $6 million. And we're here today to talk with you because I know that we share a vision and mission to serve these kids. And these are kids that need more. They need more. And that more is what we provide. And that's what's going to help put them on a more level playing field with their peers. We really appreciate your time today and your consideration. And I urge you to read through the packet we've provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rita Tetzloff?
Well, I hate to follow that act because
Yeah, that's a tough one.
you were amazing. You moved me. And I want to talk about the mundane class size. Something that I think you guys have grown tired of hearing me speak about. But I wanted to tell you, I was at a meeting at PAUSD the other day for incoming 9th grade parents. And, what a great staff, really. I was amazed by the assistant principal. I'd never met her. And I loved the questions and the answers. She was so specific, and in everything she could point to a policy. She would say, oh, go to pally.net/whatever it was. And then the question came up about class size. And I thought, I can't wait to hear the answer to this one. And one of the parents asked, so what can I know you have several geometry classes. What can I expect from my kids in terms of class size? And she smiled and she paused and she said, well, and I'm thinking, wouldn't a class size policy be amazing if she could just say, yes, our class size policy says that geometry in 9th grade will be 22 students and the maximum will be 25. I'm throwing out some numbers. And go to pally.net/class size policy. But instead she said, well, we'd like it to be around 24, and maybe it could be 25 or 26. But the main thing that struck me is the words try and we'd like, rather than definitive answers. We should know, as parents, we should know what the high school administration and the district is staffing at. And I know you've made some great progress. I mean, this year really is a great example of how well you've brought class sizes down in the high schools. But I'm afraid that we're at risk of potentially losing all that good work with the incoming bubbles and without a staff side policy. So I took a stab at creating one, and I emailed it to all of you. I even have copies, because I think it's a discussion that you need to have. And I'd like to request that this board ask the district staff to create a staff size, class size policy and put it forward to you. So that you can discuss and put it in place for this upcoming school year. The other thing I just wanted to say in regards to that, a class size policy would help you when you're trying to decide on one budget topic about cutting 3 headcount for the middle school. Potentially, not cutting them away, but not adding them, I think is what was said. And I like the analysis. I've done my own analysis, and I've told Ms. Mack all along that I think that should be done. But I didn't say you should cut it out of the budget. What I said is I think it needs to be moved to the high schools because I still think you're light. Now remember, we're a unified district, so that budget wasn't assigned just to middle schools. It could easily move to the high schools. But really, do you know if you need it for the high schools? Tomorrow, you're going to know exactly what the registration data looks like. I know that's the deadline. So you will have that data. You can look at it. You can see exactly what you need and decide if you need that 3 headcount. But I know with the increase in advisories, with the increase of about 200 students, and you will need that additional 3 headcount on top of the 12 that you have. So my request is please put in a class size policy, approve it soon, use that to determine what we really need at the high schools, eventually put a class size policy for middle schools as well, and then decide. But don't just use your gut feeling to decide, because we as parents need to know and have confidence that the process is transparent.
Thank you, Ms. Tetzloff.
Thank
I think
you.
our little buzzer isn't working.
Thank you.
Oh, it turned red. I'm sorry. That just means it's almost gone. Sorry, you had 22 seconds left. User error. I'm the
Thank
user
you.
that errored. I have to say, this little device is the most confusing thing for the 5 of us. We'll all take our turn at being confused by it.
We have these things.
Today's turn is Mr. Dauber's turn. Barbara Best, we have one more card.
Good morning, I'm Barbara Best. I'm going to talk about something hopefully simple. Last year, the board approved some funding for a breakfast program at select elementary schools, and I'm speaking on behalf of that. I presented research that shows definitively, gathered over the last 30 years, that providing food to children improves their ability to learn and improves their behavior. And considering that the MATD and this district is focused on the achievement of the historically underrepresented students, I think it's clear that providing breakfast to these children is going to help the district protect its funds that it is committing to interventions to improve these children's performance. And so I understand that not all of the elementary schools have a breakfast program, and the gap is being filled somewhat by PTA and parent donations and some principal funds. But I would urge you to consider to provide breakfast at all the elementary schools and further protect our investment into those students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, those are all the cards I have, colleagues. I'll hand it over to Dr. McGee or Ms. Mack.
Great. Let me
presenting?
just make a few quick comments and turn to Ms. Mack, and we want ample time for a board discussion, to say the least. So the process since last we discussed the budget has involved a lot of hard work. We've had several meetings with our principals. We've done our whole leadership team separately and together, and we've tried to really achieve a balance among budget adjustments that we need to make at all levels, the elementary, the middle, the high school, while still preserving initiatives and certainly following those board-approved principles, which I think are the last slide of Ms. Mack's packet. We have really as our starting point, we used what we had added in the last 4 years in the flush times at, I think, what, $13 million or something over 4 years, and looked at there. So what do we add, and from there, what can we roll back? again, trying to preserve initiatives and certainly not take away from instruction, from high-quality teaching and learning, not take anything away that would promote equity and access, and certainly not taking away anything that would assure wellness and safety, those being our three goals. So we have today some new adjustments that we didn't have last time. We restored some that we did have last time. We also have in our pocket contractual services that we might roll back, some other adjustments at, again, all three levels. But at some point, we will start to impact things like class size and instruction. We also will have some pressures, as we've just heard, to add funding. We certainly heard a very compelling case from our PAC team. We're going to hear a very compelling case at our February 28th meeting with the social emotional learning framework. I know Titan Connect, Dr. Herman's back there. She's been working with her staff to look at how can we have an advisory type program at Gunn High School the first 2 years. And of course, tonight we'll be discussing our Office for Civil Rights Resolution Agreement. We see PAC and SEL, Titan Connect as investments. You spend money up front and you save it later. We invest in early childhood. I think we save money as we look down the line in remedial services. We invest in social emotional learning. Certainly we save not just funding, but really preserving mental health does so much for our students' achievement. And Titan Connect, I look at as investment. So this is going to be a very tough balancing act, and we are very eager to hear the board's ideas, suggestions. We come back on February 28th with our first interim report, and then we will take what we hear today, make adjustments for the first interim report, and continue this iterative process through April. Ms. Tetzlaff, thanks for pointing out. I was going to share the same thing, that we'll have some better data here coming shortly once our registrations are completed, and we're getting better data with our kindergarten registration as well. So we will have some more, I think, data to drive some of these decisions over the course of the next weeks and month. But with that, I'm going to turn it to Ms. Mack, and thank you for your hard work on this, Kathy and Connie.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. This is the district's budget development and financial reporting calendar for this year and next year's budget. Today, we're having the second budget study session on next year's budget. We had our first one in October. So we'll quickly provide an update to the projections. Again, we continue 2 scenarios, B and C, for next year. And then we'll discuss possible areas of budget reductions for next year. Take a look at the financial outlook as well as next steps for approving these budget reductions for next year. We had a budget shortfall this year. Based on the latest February estimate from the county, the growth is 4.57% over last year, and the current budget shortfall is around 4.2 million, very close to the number that we identified in August. In September, the board approved budget reductions of 3.4 million for the current year, and the remaining shortfall will be carried over to next year. So based on updated information currently, the projection under scenario B, which we use 4.56% property tax growth for next year, the same amount of growth as this year. We're projecting a net shortfall of 2.1 million. Under scenario C for next year, we're using 3.7% property tax growth, and we're projecting a net shortfall of 3.3 million. Here are the 6 areas. We group the items in 6 areas. Currently, the list of proposed or possible budget reductions total about $3.6 million. I'm going to go over these really quickly because you've seen these before, and the explanations are in the packet. So the first area is personnel reduction in the district office. We have been reviewing district-level positions since July and have identified a number of positions that can likely be consolidated to yield a savings of roughly about $1.16 million. I want to point out this amount of $1.16 million is about $400,000 more than the $860,000 that we identified in October when we had our first budget study session. The second area is finding alternative funding sources. The first proposal is to increase the share of the district's share of rental income from 33% to 40% for next year. So estimate additional income to the districts roughly about $150,000. The second proposal is to find funding sources for our AAR program. This year, we were awarded a state grant which will provide funding to the program for a few years, and therefore we can free up roughly about $150,000 from the general fund. The third area is to roll back the budget additions that Dr. McGee, or some of the budget additions that Dr. McGee mentioned in his remarks. And there are 2 proposals here. The first one is to roll back the allocation of $100,000 to elementary schools for field trips. And the second proposal is to reduce the per student funding to schools and roll the amount back closer to the previous level of $70 back in 2012. And so our proposal here is to reduce the allocation by $20 per student from the current allocation of $105 to $85 per student. Estimate savings is about $245,000. The next group is program adjustments. So the first item under this category is, in the past, each year, the district sends several administrators to the Harvard Institute over the summer for professional development. Our proposal is to discontinue this practice for an estimated savings of about $40,000. The next item is to evaluate middle school English learner program to determine whether we can consolidate the program to one site. So currently we have the main program at GLS, but we also have a small program at Terman. Estimated savings of this possible consolidation would be around $75,000. The next category is reduction in certificate and classified personnel. We have a number of items under this category. Items 8 and 9 have to do with possibly restructuring responsibilities of our TOSAs and reassigning some of them back to classrooms. Currently, we're estimating about 6 TOSAs that we can reallocate back to classrooms for a total savings of $750,000. Item number 10 is to restructure the IS program. There are several approaches that we can achieve this restructuring. The current recommendation is to work with the current ISs in the spring, and principals support the approach of eliminating the IS stipends, which would yield a savings of roughly $200,000. Next, item 11 is with the declining enrollment at the elementary sites, we think we can capture a savings of 1 FTE school psychologist. The savings is around $150,000. Next item also is at the elementary level. With the declining enrollment, we think we can reduce elementary music teacher by about 0.3 FTE. Then the last item under this group is review clerical positions at the high schools for the possibility of saving 2 FTEs, roughly $136,000 there. This category has to do with the class size reduction teachers that the board approved last year, continuing to fund more teachers to reduce class sizes in 17-18. So based on the anticipated declining enrollment for the middle schools, starting with next year, we feel, and also the fact that we only have a number of classes at the middle schools that are over 30 students, we feel the need is more at the high schools rather than the middle schools. So this proposal is not to add the 3 teachers to middle schools. In terms of outlook, on the positive side, these are things that will help our budget, which include declining enrollment, and we continue to see support from the community and statewide for education. And then the third area is we do have adequate reserve. In terms of budget pressures, with seeing slower economic growth starting in 2016, we're also seeing lower property tax revenue growth in Palo Alto when compared to our neighboring basic aid districts. Also, recently, CalPERS reduced their investment returns, the rate of their investment returns. So the impact is higher rates to employers. So the proposed or approved rate increases will further add to the already high pension costs in our budget. And now,
Ms. Mack, could you put a dollar number on that just for, to tell us?
yes, so CalPERS, the increase, there will be slight increase in 17-18, roughly about 100,000. And then after that, the next 3 years, when I say increases, already to what was proposed before. So starting in 18-19, the increase is more like additional 500,000 more each year. So when you add up, the total cumulated increase is roughly about 2 million, in the next 4 or 5 years. So it's pretty significant. Total. in total. So next year, roughly about 100,000, then 18, 19, additional 500,000, year following 500,000, year following 500,000. 500,000 every year. Every year, right. Right, yes. So the impact is now pension cost increase will consume more than 1.5% of property tax growth every year for the next 4 years. So it's pretty significant. Next item is we're anticipating lower coupley lease revenue because Foothill vacated coupley in September, and the rent from the new tenants is roughly, based on our estimate, roughly about 180,000 lower than what it was before. And then with ROP, we'll lose all of the ROP income in 2018, which is about 600,000. And then the last item is what you heard this morning from PAC, their request from the district to share the deficits of this running the state program. So I'm putting the outlook out here, although we're not making any recommendations, but there's strong reasons to be conservative in our projection, in our multi-year projection. So throughout this budget balancing process, like past years, we're following the board adopted budget balancing principles that the board adopted in 2009. So in terms of the next steps, we're having a second budget study session where we get more inputs and ideas from the board and the community. And Dr. McGee will have a community forum in the next few weeks. And then we'll have more discussion at the February 28th board meeting and March 14th. Our schedule is we plan to have recommendations, to bring recommendations to the board on March 14th and ask board approval at the March 28th meeting. But if we need more discussion time, we can push that out to April. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? This is not a commentary, this just want to clarify. You say that 1.5% of the property tax growth every year is from CalPERS. You're talking about
No, both
really 25%.
Both CalPERS and STRS.
But you're saying if we have a 4% property tax growth, it's 1.5, so it's really a quarter or more.
Quarter more.
It's used to fund the pension. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really 1.5% of the property tax growth, it's 1.5 points.
4.5.
Right, I just want to clarify that because I don't want people to be confused.
Okay.
I get you.
Maybe only you and I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So do you want to say anything, or can we go
No,
to
I
board,
would just soon listen.
board input? Okay.
Right.
You're saying 25%.
Shall we do a five-minute round? Do you want to do a?
You know, could I add one
8-minute
more
round?
budget pressure, which I neglected to say, and that is the ACS. We met with them yesterday, and they are looking to increase by from 100,000 to 147,000 for the same level of services. So, sorry.
All right.
Uh,
Any other good news you want to add?
Actually, we do. It looks like we're going to have, in addition to our extension of our AAR grant.
Okay.
That's not official, but we have we were invited, and it looks so that will, but that's, once that's official, we'll make a formal announcement. But
Okay, great.
there you go.
Mr. Dauber, do you want to start?
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. That's all right.
Dauber.
Thank you for this. I have several comments and questions. First, Ms. Mack, do we have any information yet from the assessor's office about next year's property tax revenues?
Yes, we did. We had a meeting yesterday.
Ah.
So the outlook for next year is very similar to this year and last year. So the trend and everything is very similar. They did mention home sales are slowing down, meaning this is countywide. They're seeing, fewer homes, fewer sales transactions. But in terms of price, price still continue to go up. It's just fewer sales transactions.
So fewer cases where we get an increase in the property tax base, essentially, for that.
This is countywide.
I see. So the 4.5% for this year seems like a reasonable estimate for next year, or do you expect a decline? I'm sort of looking at our scenarios B and C here.
So it can be a reasonable number, and also, the growth can also be lower. Next year's growth can also be lower than this year. So it's still too early to tell what the growth would be. We probably won't know, don't have a better idea probably until May when we prepare our budget. So that's why I put out the financial outlook, and we should take a more conservative approach. As a matter of fact, it would be my recommendation to use scenario C moving forward.
Okay, thank you. In general, my goal is to make cuts away from the classroom and away from the educational mission of the district, because I think that we need to remember the sort of big picture is that the community has provided us with $220, $30 million for educating students, and we need to be able to assure the community that we are running the organization in a way that is sort of maximally efficient for doing that, and that we don't have overhead that isn't necessary in order to achieve that educational mission. And so I have been consistently asking for a comprehensive list of areas where we can make savings in administration away from the classroom so that we can weigh those savings, opportunities for savings against educational cuts. And so while I appreciate the fact that we're at $1.2 million or so on this, I think that we need to see, the board needs to see a much deeper and more comprehensive list of options for cutting expenses in administration, in the district office, and in administrative expenses across the district, because we really need to get to the point where we can be assured that the next dollar, essentially, of cuts needs to come from the educational mission of the district. And I don't think that we're at that point yet. Most of the savings, and this is sort of, I think, a consequence of the fact that obviously most of the spending in the district is in the school sites and in classrooms. But when I can't assure the community that the educational cuts that we're making are necessary until I see a list of potential cuts that are deeper than the ones that we're seeing, and I can see that essentially the pain of those cuts in terms of the educational mission is higher than it would be to cut, teachers or TOSAs or so forth. So my desire is going to be to look for, from staff, a much longer and more comprehensive list. I would certainly see something in the neighborhood of $3 million in cuts from administrative expenses rather than $1.2 million. And one last comment. I think that we are going to need to, I think Ms. Mack's point, more discussion than what is contemplated in this schedule in order to get to the point where we have a budget that we feel comfortable with. So I'm going to be looking to add some time, either more meetings or more time on the schedule. And I'm sorry for overrunning my time.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So, I just want to make sure I have this right. So you're looking for an additional 1.8 million in administrative cuts?
Yeah, I think that we need a list that, and here's, that's a somewhat arbitrary number, but let me tell you what I'm looking for at least is, I would like to see a list that when we get to the bottom of it, we're all convinced that that last cut is really not the right place and that we should be looking for cuts in the educational mission.
Yeah, I think we can do that. I just doing a quick, off the top of my head calculation of how many administrative positions that is. And at some point that does get into the school sites. I mean, that's another, that up there 1.2 represents about 8 different changes due to consolidation, elimination, so that would be another 10. So at some point, we do get into things like assistant principals, as we heard last night. So I think if we could just stick with that last thought and not have a flat dollar amount, I think we can certainly come back with that. But I'll leave that to the rest of the board.
Okay, yeah, I'm certainly interested in hearing my colleagues' reaction on this point. Thanks.
I'd like to add that we cut 600,000 from the current year's budget as well in district office administrative expense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, and can you turn your mic around so we can get you on? We're going clockwise. I'm a clockwise kind of girl.
It's great having a presiding officer. This is great.
I'm sure he meant that in the nicest way.
I think I won't take that the wrong way.
Well, I appreciate the clear presentation and the work behind it. I'm not satisfied where we are with balancing the budget. Next year, again, we'll be using $2 million of reserves and borrowing to make up our shortfall. Plus, we are now effectively saying with these proposed reductions that we have no ability to fund other important initiatives aside from dipping into reserves, that the board's hands are effectively tied. In order for the board to do its most important job of setting district priorities, we need staff to give us more budget options. We need to know what the options are. I am confident that, Dr. McGee, that we can find more options. In just the last few years, we've added several $1 million in recurring expenses. For instance, we added $750,000 in annual incremental full-day kindergarten students for all, based on limited evidence that will reduce the achievement gap. In fact, even the MATD report did not recommend it. We have also given permanent raises of about $650,000, the Me Too raises, to administrators without regard to their individual performance or competitive compensation levels. In addition, as Ms. Mack's analysis showed us, we've added about $7.3 million in non-teacher expenses in the last 4 years, including administrative support, technical support, and legal fees. Now, I'm not saying that any of these particular actions were necessarily wrong or bad. Some were highly desirable. But budgets are about making choices, and those recently made choices are, in our current budget climate, subject to being revisited. We need to revisit them. Since we've added several $1 million in new non-classroom expenses so recently, I don't accept at face value that further cuts beyond those that staff has proposed must come out of the classrooms. And frankly, I need to say that while I very much appreciate Ms. Mack's work and that of her team, I'm disappointed that after many months, which the board was told was needed to have a thoughtful, inclusive, and thorough budget reduction process, the current proposals are all we got. I expected more, and we need more. At the board meeting on December 13th, I asked Dr. McGee to prepare a list of cost reductions that were substantially further than the amount of just the shortfall. And Mr. Daub has been asking for such a list since this process began. That has not been done. The list today shows $3.7 million of cuts versus $3.3 million in shortfall. And in fact, if you look at Exhibit D in Ms. Mack's packet, which lists the shortfall proposals since October, you can see the numbers actually gone down, not up, since October. We are now at 3.57 million versus 3.725 in October. So rather than the list getting longer, the list's gotten shorter. It's now mid-February and the staff's asking to finalize the plan by next month. I cannot agree to that, since I think we haven't even begun to get the options we need to do our job. This is a serious problem. It's been the same problem since the budget process began, and we need to change how we are addressing it starting today if possible. So I ask that the staff, Dr. McGee, as quickly as possible, identify, I'll up Mr. Dauber $2 million in specific additional non-classroom cost reductions. And I suggest that the focus be on things that were added in the last 4 years, where we've added considerable new staff and programs. That amount should give the board the kind of options we need to do our most important job and make thoughtful choices. Thank you.
Ms. DiBrienza.
Okay, well, I have a long list of things I'd like to talk about, but since we're talking about sort of this issue of what else is possible, I have several thoughts about it. I would like to see a list of like what would come next, right? If you had to cut more, what's your next, what's the next thing you think you could do without? What's the next thing you think you could do without? I am concerned that I hear us sort of pitting classroom dollars versus administrative dollars when they're so closely tied together. We have 17 different school sites, and without a strong central district, we're 17 islands out there floating around separately. And I think we're committed to sort of maintaining some parity from site to site, and that requires a lot from this central administration. So I appreciate the cuts that you found so far, and I trust your judgment and your cabinet's judgment that those were cuts that you can live with. I do want to make sure that we're cutting as far away from the classroom as possible, so I would like to see what comes next, although I'm not positive that the next thing isn't going to, it all impacts the classroom, right, in some way. So I do think we would benefit from seeing what would be the next thing, and yet a lot of the things that you have proposed cutting in this budget are recent additions that we did okay without before. And I think this is anywhere is going to be a tough place to make budget cuts from, but I do think that our community has pretty high expectations, and no matter what you look at to cut, we say, oh, but this is really important. Oh, but this is really important. I think this is what our community has very high expectations for what we provide our students, and they should. But the recent cuts that you proposed seem reasonable to me. And I think that we would benefit most from seeing sort of a B list of what else you think from sort of central administration would be your next priority, so that we could then compare it against the other cuts you're looking for that are closer to the classroom. And I have lots of other specific things, but as far as the general budget, I think that's all I've got for now. For continuing that conversation.
Thank you. Ms. No, I'm okay. I'm looking at the time, and
Okay.
I can last few minutes.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that we've gone this far. I do agree with my colleagues. I think we have farther to go. I've always felt that we should be going with scenario C. And so I feel like there's only upside to that, and that is that we're wrong and there's more money, and then we can spend money on things. But the pain of having to go through this again if we're wrong the other way isn't great. There are a number of things that we want to add this year. We've been actively talking about adding, and that's everything from what we've been actively talking about, like the SEL program, to the fact that our achievement gap activities are very important. And I'm a little concerned that somehow or another we haven't drawn the line between what we're doing with PAC or other preschool programs and our achievement gap efforts. And on that, I would really like to see our LCFF folks or LCAP folks and MATD folks to make sure that thinking about what PAC provides in our strategy? How does it work in our strategy? Is it important for our strategy? If we have any partners who we're not regularly meeting with, I think we got to change that. I'm concerned that we haven't regularly been meeting with PAC. I'm sure there are other partners we haven't regularly been meeting with, but it's hard for us to know where the alignment points are when we don't do that. I think you mentioned ACS. We had a community member talk about class size. I mean, all of these things cost money. So to not have any room in our budget to add any programs, I think is short-sighted of us. I'm going to ask Dr. McGee, and I don't think you can answer that right now, but we should be going through our budget and saying, is there anything that we should be applying for grants for that we're not today? So I'm thrilled that we're applying for grants for the AAR, but there's probably some other things. I wonder if the SEL program is something we can apply for grants for. Actually, I wonder if subsidized childcare is something we can apply for grants for, but I don't know. I think somebody needs to go through this. What is the number of people we have in the district office today?
The whole head count?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look at Dr. Bowers to get that information.
I think it's 184.
I may be able to have that for you later in the meeting.
Okay, so I guess my question is, 8 people? What percentage is that? And
Those are administrative positions.
okay, so what percentage of our administrative positions is 8 people? I am reluctant to come up with a number when I don't know the impact of each reduction. And so both the percentage impact, but also what's the impact on program if a position disappears? Because to Mr. Brienza's point, there are some administrative positions that don't impact the classroom, maybe, but there are some that really do impact the classroom. And we should be aware of that, because if we cut something that then is critical to a program that we think is really important, we should not be surprised by that. That should be a decision we make. That should be a trade-off decision we make. I'm just going to look at this for a second. I really feel like the ISs provide a service in the high schools. And if there is no incentive to be an instructional supervisor, if we have no leadership of the teams at each department, particularly as our high schools get bigger, I believe that we're going to have a big problem. And I don't want us to be short-sighted. So an IS isn't really an administrator, but it sort of goes to the point I just made. I also would take a look at the teachers you're talking about from middle school. If the bubble is moving to high school, I am reluctant to say that we just don't add those teachers. I think we probably need them at the high school, but I don't have an analysis to show me whether we do or not. And I think we need to take a look at that. The other things that you have on here seem to make sense to me. I think if we had a year or two where we didn't get to go to some outside programs, it probably wouldn't kill us. It certainly is a nice thing to have, but it's a nice rather than a need. We added the field trip, which is not that much. I mean, it's $100,000. We added that because we have kids in certain schools that, just let me finish this, that haven't been able to go on field trips. So we have to figure out how to, if we cut things, we still need equity. We still need to figure out how to make equity happen.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Baden-Caswell. With respect to the FTEs in the district office, Kathy, you gave me something a while back. The number then was 184.45 FTEs. And one of for me, sometimes I like to look at some metrics, just a few sort of touch points to see if the way the district is unfolding makes sense. So one of the things I'd asked for ages ago was district office personnel versus number of students. And so back in 2002, we had 14.4 district office personnel per 1,000 students. So 2002, we were pretty flush. That dropped in the 09, 10, 11 timeframe down to about 13 and then down to 12. And I think it went from 13 to 12 more because our our students increased. So the number of employees actually dropped a little bit, but the students went up, so the ratio was different. So now that we were flush again a while ago, it was up at 14.6. So it would be great for me if we had a target for that number, sort of roughly. It's, of course, not a completely linear relationship, because there are people you need. If we went to, 2 students, we'd still need somebody in this office. But it seems like 13's about the right number, since when the last time we went through a trough like this, it was about 13. That probably means we need to take about 25 people out of this big, long list, which doesn't seem like a lot on top of 184, but it certainly is a lot, because we know what those folks do and how that's benefited us in the last few years and that sort of thing. So anyway, so if there's an updated version of this, if you could share it with my colleagues, that would be awesome, because they're kind of geeky too. Another question I had was, way back when, we had a line item that was taking one day out of the calendar that was a non-student day, and that was kind of floating around on our lists. And now that is not one of the things that we would consider a structural change or doing things differently. It's kind of a backstop measure when all of a sudden you've gotten to, close to the year and you're thinking this deficit's going to be bigger than I can deal with. Can you remind me what that number is, the savings on that?
700,000, was it?
700,000? Okay. And so that would be a non-student day, right? That would be one of those in-service days, something like that. Okay. Let me ask a question about class size. So we're a unified district, which gives us the luxury to kind of move our dollars around. We talk about class size. I like the idea of being a little more prescriptive in a policy on what that is. Right now, it's buried in the teacher's contract, what we have laid out on class size targets, I believe. I think one of the things that's confusing when we talk about this is the difference between forecasts and budgets and variance to budgets and things like that. So like if we say we don't think we need these 3 teachers in middle school, but in fact we need them, we would add them, right?
Right.
So if we're forecasting we don't need them and we move the money around in the budget for something else, we're not going to come in, next October and say, oh, well, it wasn't in the budget, so we're not going to add those 3 teachers. We're going to add them. If we need them, we're going to add them.
So in our budget, we have budgeted additional teachers for enrollment growth. So these 3 teachers to middle schools, 3 teachers to high schools is to reduce the class size. So I would actually change the staffing formula to reflect that, lower the class size staffing ratio.
So, but if we have if we decide we want to have class size targets and I'm not going to say upper end necessarily, but like the range and what percentage hits that range, we're going to hire to that. And you're just trying to figure out what that's going to cost us when you build the budget. We wouldn't say, oh, we thought we weren't going to need these 3 teachers, and so now we're not going to hire these 3 teachers. If we need them, we're going to hire them.
If we need them, we'll hire them. That's correct.
Okay. So even though we've added for enrollment growth in the high schools new teachers, if we make some decision about class size and it means, oh, the formula changes a little bit and we need 1 more or 2 more, we're going to hire those.
Right.
Okay. I just want to be clear about that.
But I believe the 3 are in addition to that.
Yes, I think so, too.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
I just wanted to make sure that we're going to make a decision about class size and we're going to hire to that decision. And it's not going to be a budget decision that we're not doing that because the numbers changed or the number of students change or enrollment change. It flexes with enrollment. Is my 5 minutes really up?
Well, according to the little box, yeah. I don't think anybody's agitating for you to stop, though, if you want to.
Okay, well, I have one other thing. When we did this back in 2010, we went out and we did the budget survey, and we did town hall meetings, and we did meetings with community and parents. we had things at that time that seemed like they were sacred and we shouldn't talk about them. A few things, like doing online courses or other kinds of sort of re-engineering of processes, things like that. I can't tell by the level of detail we're looking at if that kind of stuff is in play or not. Do you have kind of like to sort of build on Mr. Dauber and Mr. Collins' sort of list, kind of the wacky list of things that
Sure.
that we've discussed in the past?
We have that, don't we? I remember seeing it. But we took, back then, it was a long list,
Yeah,
right?
back,
Are you talking about survey done by PTA?
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
We
Yes,
At
we-
that
we
time,
have-
and
yes,
those sort
we
of
have
those
that.
meetings and the kinds of things that came out of there that at the time we didn't need to go that far.
Right. So we can include that survey in the next packet.
And to be completely open, Kimono, I did that survey, so I'm not touting my own work. I'm just saying I remember that it exists. Okay. Okay, team, do we?
Can I make a
wanna
comment
give- yeah, I
before
was
you
gonna
have
say,
to
do we
take
want?
off? Yeah. So while on one hand, I appreciate the goal of getting to a certain number per thousand, but on the other hand, things have changed. You look at the mental health professionals, for example, that we've added. I don't hear which, to a certain extent, are district office people. And they change for a reason and a good reason. We've significantly increased our special education staffing. That's for a good reason. So I think we need to be very thoughtful about do we just hitting a number is much easier than it sounds, especially when we look at how the needs have changed. You know, this is student services is where I think we've added the most people. Our IT, what we're using now for technology has changed than it was 4 years ago. We certainly have some things we can do there. But we're going to make, again, every effort. We'll come back with a list, but I will tell you it's going to include more than just administrators. I can guarantee that because we do have well, for example, I'll give you a quick example. We have Ms. Coffey volunteered. Our elementary school enrollment is going down by 30%, so that we can keep the same level of music instruction, but have 30% less salaries. We haven't touched the libraries. We haven't touched Spectra Art. So at some point, things do start getting sensitive about this, and you get in some really challenging areas. But those are we are prepared to come with, a longer list, another 2 million if that's what the board wants, but it will be a combination of district level and school level, and we will, provide the detailed rationale for it. But I just want to say hitting a number is there's some nuance involved there because I think we want to preserve our special education, our wellness. Several of you have spoken about the importance of equity as well. So, for example, we didn't have an equity administrator, but I'm not going to suggest that we eliminate that position. I'll tell you that right now, because that is one of our key district goals. So.
I also want to remind the board, a couple items that were mentioned, the full day kindergarten costs and also the furlough day. So we can put those on the list. Just want to remind the board that these are negotiated items. Any changes would need to go back to the unions.
Right.
So, colleagues, shall we do another round? I'm going to step out, so if I can hand the gavel over to you, Mr. Dauber, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Thank you for.
Yeah, actually, I would like to get, if you have one more minute, Ms. Godfrey's reaction on this, and I can make a formal motion as well, if it would be helpful to staff to direct the superintendent to provide a list of, and I'll adopt Mr. Collins' number, an additional $2 million in, I would say, administrator and clerical staff options for the board at our next budget discussion.
Does it have to be staff? I mean, could it?
Exactly.
Could it be staff? Does it have to be staff? Like, could it be stuff? Could it be contract services? Could it be?
Sure. Is that, yes, $2 million in additional
possibilities.
cost savings. And of course, you can choose a mix of staff and stuff.
I would like to suggest that in doing that, we can see the impact from your perspective of doing that. I feel like one of the things that's been missing is we've had to add our own opinions of the impact, and we might not have full visibility.
So it's probably easiest to reduce that to a motion. So do I have a second for that?
I don't know that we
No,
have to
I
do
don't
that.
need a motion.
Okay.
And plus, it's not, we don't have an action item agendized. There'll be opportunity to make a motion at the February 28th meeting.
I just want to be clear, as long as you feel like you have a clear direction.
I
then
do,
That's fine.
and we can do that, but, and I want to say, we can, I intend to make add to that list, probably, so. But I think 2 million's reasonable
So
amount.
if I can just ask, because as you can tell, I'm a little frustrated about this process. And I think it's appropriate to do a motion. It is permissible to do a motion at a study session. The budget is agendized.
You're the board, you
Good.
make the decision,
So
so, yeah.
If Mr. Daub would like to make a motion, I'd be happy to second it, just so we can get it on the record that a majority of the board requested this specific thing.
I agree. I think that's consistent with the,
I think the whole board wants it, so I'm confused. Are you worried that it won't go in the minutes that we all wanted unless it's a motion?
I am worried that unless a clear majority of the board indicates for the record that they have asked for this, that Dr. McGee perfectly reasonably can come back later and said, the clear majority of the board did not ask for this, so I'm not providing it.
I don't think anyone's arguing against it.
I'm not arguing against it.
so, well, I made a motion. I don't see any downside.
What's the harm of doing a motion?
Yeah, I don't see a downside to proceeding with a motion.
Sounds like it'll carry unanimously.
If it's just a discussion, that's something we can still vote on. If this meeting just is for discussion, not for action, we still can vote on that?
So the bylaws, and we can I pull out the specific one, but I actually looked at what can be done in a study session. There's no limitation on the action that the board can take in a study session so long as we are acting with respect to an agendized item, which the budget certainly is. I would say that certainly a motion, and it's the reason I made it, is that a motion that simply directs staff to provide more information for subsequent action is certainly within the scope of what we can do in a study session. And I think my sense is that it's useful to give clear direction to staff and to make it a matter of the record so that we can refer back to it.
So are you saying that anytime we want anything from staff, we need to make a motion? That's what I'm worried about, is that we're getting to a situation where it's sort of, the superintendent comes back and says, you didn't make a motion, so I didn't go and do it. I mean, I didn't bring the information back. I'm just concerned about that.
So on December 13th, I asked for substantially more cuts, and Dr. McGee did not say, no, we will not do that, or either at the meeting or later, did not say, no, we will not do that, or didn't say anything. I think he said, I could hear him mutter okay on the video. But in fact, the cuts have not gone up at all since the time we started a list of cuts. And that makes me concerned that unless we are very explicit and very direct about what we asked for, that Dr. McGee, I think he's perfectly within his rights to say it wasn't clear that a majority of the board wanted that, and therefore I didn't feel the need to provide it. And so an event where it is important, and I think this is one of the most important things we do, it seems appropriate that the board would have a motion. It doesn't always have to be the case, but I think unless we clearly do that, Dr. McGee is within his rights to say, I didn't have time, I didn't get to it, I changed my mind, I didn't agree. That's his prerogative. And we need to say this is what we
at some point.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think this is a very combative way to go, but, I'll support a motion.
Okay, well, let me just add to that my own gloss, which is that one of the principles that is in our bylaws is that the board can only act collectively, and I think that the way that we act collectively that's the clearest to the community and to the staff is to reduce our requests or direction to a motion and then to test the majority's approval of that by a vote. So I think it's a way that is consistent with our bylaws, and I do think that it avoids subsequent confusion about what the board wanted, which is why I made the motion in the first place. So let me just restate it and then see if I still have a second for it, which is that the superintendent will return at our next discussion of the budget with a list totaling at least $2 million of additional cost savings. And to take Ms. Peyton-Caswell's point, with a description of the impact of those savings on the educational program. Is that?
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so then I have another motion then, if this is how we're going to do it.
Sure.
You can tell this is not my favorite way to do it, but I would like to know what your anticipation of additional programs that are part of our goals for the year, things like the SEL. I'd like a list of that and what you anticipate they're going to cost. I'm not going to hold you to the exact amount, but it's an order of magnitude question.
Yeah, and we're actually honing in on some of that. So as part of the SEL framework, Dr. Herman and Dr. Creo and their team have been working with that. So we'll have a good estimate on that. You know, PAC, we've already met with them. We had an earlier meeting about their needs. The Office for Civil Rights, I'm still ready for a proposed letter of engagement from potential investigators, but we should have that within the week. So I think we'll be able to deliver on that.
Okay, so that's, my motion is that we ask the superintendent to come back with an estimated cost for additions to the budget that
Fall within
fall
our
within
goals.
our goals.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Are there, if there are no more motions, I will, we'll do another round. Shall we do 3 minutes?
We have time.
There's a lot to talk about.
You want to do 5 minutes? Okay. I want to also invite staff and the public, if anyone does want to comment on or to provide input. We took public input earlier in the meeting, but we are open for input throughout. And so if you would like to provide a card, then please feel free to do that, and we will interrupt ourselves at the appropriate point to hear from you. All right, let me start this. I do want to briefly visit the question of what sort of things should appear on this list, in my view, of $2 million, so that we don't, at least from my perspective, don't have to iterate, which is that I am not looking myself for a list of $2 million in cuts that staff thinks are the right places to cut. I'm actually looking for a list that when we get to the bottom of it, you really don't want to cut, so that we can really test the limits of what is desirable here. I want the board to be enabled finally to make the priority decisions, and I think we can only do that if you provide us a list of things that you really are uncomfortable with. I'm certainly uncomfortable with a lot of the student-facing cuts, you know, including the shifting the savings of the $375,000 for middle school teachers and not applying them to our high school teaching mission. So I really want to see administrative cuts that I feel even more uncomfortable about, and I'm not there yet, and I'd like to see that in that list of $2 million. So, Dr. McGee, what you said before about how we won't find enough administrators to fill out that list, I really hope that you are able to do that when you sort of sit down with your sharpened pencil.
We shall see.
and your eye shade. In terms of the PACC, PACCC, not a PAC. In terms of PAC, I am a very strong supporter of the idea that we should share the burden of this gap with PAC. And I would like to hear about the status of the discussions that the staff is having and to get a sense about what dollar amount we're talking about. It seems reasonable to me, given the impact of this program on our students, that we should be looking in the neighborhood of splitting the difference with this organization, which suggests to me a number of around $200,000. So I'll put that stake in the ground. But I have not yet, so I'm interested in what the staff's, the status of that discussion is. Ms. Mack, are you familiar with that? Can you comment on that, or?
So we
Oh,
have
this is
not
me.
started talking about the amounts yet.
You haven't had a discussion
Right,
about amounts?
so we receive the same information as you do today.
Okay, so I would, and this I think is consistent with the Ms. Caswell's motion, which just passed. I'd like to have a number for that when we come back at our next meeting, so that we can understand that and obviously hear from PAC about whether that's consistent with their sense about what they need, and then we can weigh it against our other priorities. But don't need to say more about that. In terms of the timeline, I think we need to figure out how we can add more, probably at least another study session on this topic. So February 28th, I don't think we have anything in the morning of the 28th.
We
right?
have SIPSAs.
Oh, we have SIPSAs, okay. So we got a lot of SIPSAs.
Yeah, we have a lot of morning things coming on, yeah.
So, Dr. McGee, what is your sense about the time that you're going to need to come back on the two requests that you've received?
Well, ideally, certainly by March 14th, I'd love to have maybe we could have I'd have to look at my calendar, sometime between the February 28th and the March 14th meeting would be great.
Okay, so we'll look at that on the agenda setting for something like March 7th. I'm just picking a date out, but so that we can have some opportunity to do that before we meet again, and then we can decide. So the board discussion on February 28th. So let me just say this: in agenda setting, we'll take account of what we've heard and make some decisions about what's the right way to proceed in a way that sort of enables us to have useful conversations. Okay, Mr. Collins.
Thank you. I want to take a second to emphasize why I think this very deep list and a more creative list with some, out-of-the-box thinking is so important. 3.3 million is the amount of the deficit this year. Scheduled for next year. 2.2 is the number of the year after. 2.7 is the number of the year after that, and 0.6 is the number the year after that. And those are cumulative. Okay? So what this forecast is saying, and this is scenario C, is that by the year 2020, we will have need to take out $8.6 million of expenses in order to be break even. And that's with 3 years of funding tech refresh out of bonds and drawing down, paying for $2 million of things we used to pay for out of general funds, paying for out of reserve funds and out of the bond. So we're just getting started here. I mean, we've got to really think carefully about our economic model because, frankly, under a deep recession scenario like a couple we've seen in the last 15 years, we will not achieve even these property tax assessed value growth. It will be lower than this. So I think we've got a lot of cost cutting in front of us, and we need to get good at it. And it'll be a routine process, I think, that we do every year for the next 4 years. So we ought to come up with a process that we feel good about and a list that is pretty long, because I think this will be a recurring theme. I also think, you know, revisiting some of the, or visiting some things that we haven't visited before, like fundamentally reorganizing HR and to see if there's a way to do it differently. Did it with IT, where we've added, I think, 12 FTEs in the last 2-3 years, you know, substantial increase in staff. Outsourcing, which is very difficult to do per the ed code, but things like landscaping and facilities and payroll and IT and food service and transportation and mail and printing are things that a lot of other organizations contract for, and we have full-time employees with pension benefits that are going up doing for us. Health insurance is an area that by bargaining, we actually fix the amount that we pay, which means I think that if we reduce it, we actually don't get any benefit with the current contract, but we pay very high health insurance rates for our staff. And last but not least, I strongly urge that we cut the food budget for board meetings to zero. There's, I believe, is there food across the hall today?
There's a bowl of fruit and probably a dozen rolls. Yeah.
So there's some food across the hall, and
And coffee.
And whether people know it or not, at the closed session meetings, they serve, we get dinner. And I would say in an organization that is, I believe, does not buy coffee for its staff.
We do not.
Staff, do you guys get coffee? No? I think it's not necessary for the board to get food and coffee for its meetings. If we want it, we can pay for it, just the way the staff does. So I'd urge that small, but I think important, symbolically important change to be on the list as well. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Let me take a couple of public comment cards,
Sorry.
if I might, that I've received in the last couple of minutes. Natalie Sear and then Meb Steiner.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I appreciate the time. My name is Natalie Sear, and I'm a Palo Alto resident since my child was 2. Now it's 13 and a half in JLS. And I wanted to introduce myself specifically as a first-generation member of the middle class and first generation to go to college, same as my husband. And we are parents of a child of color here in the district. I'm also an early educator and a member of the PAC board. And what I wanted to reiterate, because I've heard this from our esteemed superintendent and from the board members, and I appreciate that as a parent and as a professional, as an advocate for our community's children, is that equity and the achievement gap are not on the board for cutting from the budget. And what I wanted to remind all of us, and there's plenty of information we can gather and share with our community, is that these goals of the district are firmly served and supported by significant research evidence that high-quality early ed positively impacts school achievement, has a potential for increasing equity, and particularly for our community's most marginalized families, as one of our staff members described before, and particularly for families who are marginalized by low income, by lack of educational attainment on the part of parents, and by children whose home language is other than English. And as a parent and as a fellow advocate, I just want to share the idea that if we are unable to fairly serve these children in our community, then we're not doing the work that all of us are here to do. So thank you so much for your work on behalf of these children.
Thanks. Thank you. Meb Steiner.
So good morning. I'm Meb Steiner. I'm president of CSEA, which represents our classified staff. First, I'd like to start off by saying that we are a unified school district. There is a we. And I really also want to express my thanks to Ms. Mack and her team for meeting with us. And I appreciate how much our collaborative efforts have been sort of the standard that we've had of really sharing information and sharing our concerns with one another. I absolutely agree with the idea that it is a question of priorities, and I think that those are the hard decisions. That's why this is such a difficult discussion. But I really, really want to emphasize that our number one priority, yes, are students, but people in general. I mean, that is what a school district is. Our buildings, our programs, everything else, it's hollow shells without people who are dedicated and motivated and excited to be here. I also want to support Ms. DiBrienzo's comment about sites versus district, but expand that. We're also getting to a point where we're like pitting admins versus teachers versus staff. That's not healthy. I have sadly been through a situation at a school community where it completely deteriorated because of that, and ultimately it trickles down to students. Several things that I want to mention here. I'm going to run out of time. When we talk about condensing and combining jobs, the workload doesn't go away. So it's consolidated and people are working harder. Transportation, cutting our field trips, critical to enrichment for our students. As it is, it's hard to hire drivers. We were hoping to expand to 7-hour contracts for our drivers so they had a living wage and were motivated to work here. And field trips would have been a critical part of what they could do during the middle of the day. I think when we talk about lists, we need to understand what is it that everyone does. I think it's hugely important. And these are critical jobs. And many, many times, something that's away from the classroom provides more support to our teachers and students than actually reducing class size. As to class size, we've had students say that they would prefer better teachers rather than a smaller class. I've also talked about the fact that we have other options. Let's utilize our aides, well-educated, professionally developed aides to help in providing small group instruction. In terms of our middle school, they're way squirrelier than our high schoolers. They need smaller classrooms than our high schoolers do. And in my opinion, the earlier we intervene, the better it is for our high schoolers. I also want to say that, you know, we've added programs. I apologize, my time is up. Would it be okay if I continued?
Yeah.
I also really want to add, we've added wonderful programs. We've got full-time testing centers at our high schools to support our students, to be able to take tests when they can, so that if they're sick or anything. We've increased our health techs and the number of hours at our middle schools. Critically important. We needed them after school. Dr. McGee talked about the increasing needs of technology. We've added iPads and all sorts of technical programs. Our mental health therapists, huge, huge service for our community. And we need to retain them. We need to keep them. We've got a wellness center and WOWs. We've added our welcome center at our district office. One of the critical pieces in the feedback that came from the community was that there was a disconnect with the district office. We will have more of a disconnect if we just keep eliminating people out of our district office. We are a unified district. We've added money for professional development.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have other cards, so I want to be fair to folks.
Just two quick things.
Okay.
The professional development budget that we added, I think is so important for all of our staff to like really have the people we have at their most effective. Then the last thing I wanted the contracts and consultants, absolutely we should look at that. And just to address very quickly Mr. Collins' comment about health insurance. Health insurance, the entire increase in cost of health insurance has been shifted to the employees. And I want to make this really clear. The school district does pay a lot of money for health insurance, but the formula is a cap multiplied by the full-time equivalent. So the total amount is more because we have more employees, but the per employee has not really increased for the district because the cap has not been increased over the last 8-10 years more than a small amount twice. All of the burden has shifted to employees, and that burden has in effect reduced the compensation. And I do want to say thank you for the 3-year contract and the fact that these salary increases were approved. I think the stability was really important, and I also think they weren't extremely excessive, but I understand the difficulty of the situation. So thank you, and I look forward to continuing a joint conversation.
Thank you. I think the board would probably appreciate hearing from you, you know, in written form as well. You made a lot of points pretty quickly. Thank you. I have two more cards, Ann Laware and Nancy Kropp for public comment. And if any other members of the public would like to comment, you need simply fill out a card and pass it up, and we will make time for you.
Hi, thank you for letting me address you all, esteemed members of the school board. I am asking that you guys do not make any per-student cuts. I'm sorry, Ann Laware. I am a member of the PTA Executive Board at Barron Park and at Terman Middle School. And I have spent 6 years at Barron Park and 2 years at Terman. And I would like to ask the school board to not make any per-student cuts at those two schools for very important reasons. We have the highest number of socioeconomically disadvantaged kids. Our PTAs do not raise as much money as the other PTAs. In particular, when I started at Barron Park, our PTA whole budget for the entire first year was $12,000. And we are still playing catch up on that a lot. We spend over $15,000 a year out of our own PTA budget for scholarships, and that's not even including supplies, because a lot of our students don't have school supplies. So the PTA pays for all of the teacher supplies for the kids, paper, pencils, all of those things. So we pay for field trips and and again, so many things that the other schools don't have to pay for out of our direct budget. And we're, especially at Barron Park, we're coming off of the school budget was not handled well, and the PTA made up a lot of that shortfall. Again, it is a matter of equity for these students. And we are doing the best that we can, and I would hope that the school board really looks at the needs of these kids that we're serving so well, but we cannot cut from them and from these schools and the teachers that work so hard to provide emotional support. It's not just, we provide food and, family support. There's so many things that go into helping maintain that community that a lot of the other schools in Palo Alto do not have to do it all. So I think I would ask again that you guys keep in mind the unique populations of Terman and Barron Park as you guys consider these cuts, because the needs are so much higher at these particular schools. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Kropp. I'm the VP of Advocacy at Terman. My son's now an outgoing 8th grader, so I've been at Terman for 3 years, and before that, Barron Park. And I'm echoing Ms. Loaire's concerns about any cuts to Barron Park and Terman. It's not just the social economic background of our kids. It's also, I've been forwarding information now to catch up our board members, but there's a long history of underfunding at Terman, that there's such a high degree of unmet needs there. And I brought with me just some of the numbers, but it was due to the middle school rental income policy that permitted the middle schools to keep their rental income, and that was about $100,000 a year differential between JLS and Terman. In the 2008-9 school year, JLS had $117,000, while Terman had $0. And I can just read it out year after year, but 2013-14 year, JLS had $102,000, Terman had $11,000. 2012, JLS had $108,000, Terman had $3,000. Year after year after year, we have a backlog of Terman not having this extra $100,000. What does that mean? It means we are so far behind in technology. Thank you, Dr. McGee. He has been working on catching Terman up, but still, we have carts in 14 classrooms, 2 Apple carts only. And then we have about 12 other, so when we do our testing, the other grades don't have access to technology. So the Terman PTA, our budget is we're trying to supplement the technology. We're trying to supplement instructional materials. We have no maker studio at Terman. We have no media center. The broadcast journalism teacher is asking PTA to fund her for devices. We do not have the funding for that. She's working with Gunn so that our Terman kids can have access to the same broadcast journalism as the kids coming from JLS. Our PTA cannot meet those needs. Obviously, we need help from the school. Please do not cut the per student budget at the school, because we're just trying to catch the term and kids up from years of having $100,000 less per year at our school. We need a lot more technology. It'd be great to have a maker studio, a media center. It'd be great to have broadcast journalism. It'd be great to have the same teacher professional development, instructional materials to truly make the middle school experience a unified school district. And so I think when I met with you, some of you, I was mentioning, don't cut the kids who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, but my current ask is just don't cut Terman. We have too much unmet needs. And also don't cut Barron Park for a similar reason. We're just playing catch up at those two schools, and they cannot handle additional cuts. In fact, what they need is additional help from the district so that we can catch up with all these things that are missing at our schools for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I have a lot of data for you I can send separately.
Please do, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Brienza.
Thanks. I'm guessing this is our last round, and there's many, many things here. But I'll try to get through what I can get through. I appreciate the way Ms. Godfrey talked about personnel per 1,000 students, and yet also the way Dr. McGee pointed out that, well, Ms. Godfrey acknowledged that it's not necessarily linear, but the differences in our needs over time. And I think when I look back at what the numbers, the personnel per 1,000 in 2001 and 2008, I don't think we had nearly as much technology going on then. And also our attention to the achievement gap and closing the achievement gap. And that's something that we've really put a lot of focus on. And I think we really, in what I've seen the cut so far, I haven't seen any, well, I've seen some, $20 per student. But by and large, that has not been, I think the achievement gap, the efforts to close the achievement gap have been protected, but it brings us to PAC. It brings us to the $20 per student. I appreciate the way you distinguish between the music program versus something like a library. So if we are serving students in music in a class-by-class basis, if enrollment's down, we don't need as many music teachers. Libraries don't work the same way. If we have a commitment to having a staffed library at each site, whether we have 287 students or 600 students, we need a librarian at those sites. Or we decide that we're gonna lock the doors for certain hours a week, and that doesn't seem equitable either. So I think there are certain things that are affected per population and certain things that aren't. So as you're bringing back this list of further cuts, I'd appreciate that distinction. What matters per student versus what kind of has to, if we're going to do it, it's a librarian at each site, whether it's a big school or a small school. Thank you to the parents who spoke about the $20 cut. I've been thinking about this cut since we sort of got the first proposal. And I was thinking about what sort of achievement gap and equity issues there were in that. And I'm pleased to say that the district at the elementary level does have a $250,000 allocation that serves elementary schools focused on students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, students who meet certain categories that we deem need extra help. We don't have that in the middle schools. And I am especially concerned that cut at the middle schools will disproportionately affect them. So although this is maybe small in the dollars we're talking about, I would like us to consider at least not cutting it for the students who qualify for Title I funding, as that could make a big difference to them, and it's smaller dollars here. When it comes to PAC, I echo, I think, what Ms. Peyton-Caswell said, that I'd like to hear from the staff as to sort of what this relationship has been and how we can further develop it, and what they see as what seems reasonable, how we can support this. Again, when we're talking about equity and parity and closing the achievement gap, this is where all evidence shows is our bang for our buck here. And I'm not too worried about the number of students that it serves as much as the significance of what it does. Of course, the numbers matter, but the fact that this is the thing we acknowledge as a district is something that we're it's where we're weakest. It's where we need to improve the most. So if this is a service that's being provided that is really make or break it for this portion of our community that we are not currently serving the way we need to be serving them, and the earlier we intervene, the cheaper it is down the road for us, and the more success they. I'm guessing my time's almost up, although there's many other issues here. One of the things I just want to mention for us all is the way we as a district and as a board talk about PI. When I sat down there, I heard over the years a shift in how we discussed PI. And PI started as this outside fundraising group so that they could give money to the schools so that the school sites could decide how to best use it. And over the years, I've seen, as we get budgets of allocations to schools, PI is included in it. I've heard board members and district members say, oh, well, I don't know if we're gonna have enough money for that, but PI can cover it. And I think we have to be really careful. It's to speak to Mr. Collins' point about we really have to be clear about what our priorities are and just put out there that, okay, this is something we're not gonna, yes, it's important, but when we're prioritizing, this is something we can't fund. We just have to, if it's something our dollars can't fund, we just have to say it. And if the school sites want to fund it through PI, they can, but I don't think we can sort of sugarcoat it and say, oh, well, we'll fund it, PI can fund it. I don't think that's within our purview, and I think that it really forces us to prioritize what we feel we have to fund, and sort of leave PI to do what they originally intended to do, and hopefully that'll let them be able to do it. I'll stop for there.
Ms. Baden-Caswell.
Yeah, I think we need to be really careful we don't do a peanut butter strategy here. What I mean is take a little from everything and then assume we can do the same amount of work. We can't. So I really encourage the superintendent to talk to staff about what that means. I'm most interested in spending money on the things that are going to impact the most kids with the highest impact. So that's what I'd like to make sure are higher priorities. We've talked over and over again about if we keep doing things the same way, they're going to cost the same, we're going to have the same issues. We talked in the fall about, and actually last spring, about looking at our operations and seeing if there are operational savings by doing things differently. So rather than just, we're going to cut this many people, but if we did this differently, we wouldn't need as many people for it. I haven't seen anything back, so I'd like to make a motion that when you come back, that there is a plan. Okay, I'm on board here. That we have a plan from you on how we're going to look at operational costs and savings. It's not just costs; it's also efficiencies. I think it could be much more satisfying to do your job when things are more efficient. So I think there's two sides to that. I also believe that our partners are really important. I was just down in Sunnyvale last week reviewing an award proposal, and it was really amazing how they're treating their partners as an extension of their organization. And the result of that is they get amazing economies of scale and commitment. So when things are good, everyone shares in it. When things are hard, everyone shares in it. I fear that our partner relationships have become much more contractor than partners. And I would like us to think about how do we shift that? Because I do think that goes back to operational cost savings, actually. Let me make my motion. So I made my motion.
I don't think.
Okay, so my motion is that you come back with, at the next board meeting, with how you are going to address looking for operational cost savings.
The next board meeting?
The next time we have this conversation. No, I'm sorry, the next time we have a budget conversation.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I have a
Thank you
dentist
for-
appointment at noon.
Yeah,
today, so
thank you
sorry.
for clarifying.
Yeah.
So our next
next study
conversation on the budget.
Okay, I want to make sure we have, so the motions are fine. I don't know if we need a vote to waive the two-meeting rule on those because we seem to be taking action. So I think that's something we'll need to discuss at some point. But can we, I want to make sure that we have Vicky's taking notes today so that we have this, rather than say I meant this, let's write it down and read it and make sure it's clear. 'Cause
Okay,
I'm
so-
not clear right now, and if I'm not clear, I'm reasonably sure.
Okay,
Our staff
so
is-
my motion is that you come back at the next budget meeting with the plan for how we're going to look at operational cost savings.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second for Ms. Baden-Caswell's motion? I'll second the motion. Discussion?
Great
Mr.
idea.
Collins?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I just,
Do you need to say all in favor or no? Oh, you're going to
no,
discuss it.
I have
Okay.
I think that make sure I understand what you're looking for and understand that that's how staff will interpret this, is that, sure. I think what you're suggesting is that you want the superintendent to come back with in addition to the list of potential cost savings, a plan for how he and staff are going to address opportunities for efficiencies in staff operations. For example, the sort of things we've been talking about, HR, IT, and so forth. Is that right?
It could be more than staff operations. It could be any operation.
Yeah, this is like paper savings or food. Yeah, I would assume those count. Those are operational issues, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, if we did enrollment differently, because they do it like that at XYZ district, we could actually save some money. I'm not looking for your plan when you come back. I'm looking for a plan on how you're going to go about doing that.
Is that all clear? I mean, my own sense in listening to Ms. Godfrey was very illuminating, is that I would expect, just based on sort of productivity increases in clerical and administrative functions, that we would see a declining number of FTE needed in functions like HR and IT in order to achieve the same amount of output. And so when we've had these discussions in the past, we've talked about sort of restoring levels to, early in the 2000s. For me, it's certainly a rebuttable presumption, but it's a presumption that we can do better than we did in the early 2000s. And so I fully support that resolution for that reason.
And I will just say that I'm bringing this up because when McKinsey was here helping us with our strategic plan, they said this was the next thing we should address. But that was 5 years ago, and we haven't really addressed it. So I think we have opportunity.
Yeah, just to add to that, that kind of opportunity for operational improvement and reorganization, what they used to call re-engineering, it's very hard for organizations to do that themselves in the normal course of business.
I agree.
Because you're so busy turning the crank and getting things done every day, it's very hard to think, how do they do that in all those other districts? So very often people enlist outside support to say, to look at your operations and come up with ideas. We have people in the community that can help with that. There are obviously paid vendors who can help with that. There may be resources at the county school board that could help with that, or at the CSBA. But I do think it's something that if I were doing it, I'd probably look for outside support because it's so hard just to do it internally.
Yes, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, can I just finish my
Of course,
comments here?
yes.
I do want to go back to the high school point that I made. I believe that in addition to whatever our formula is right now, that we do have some, already this year, some challenges. I know that there's some math classes at Gunn, for example, that are at 36, and it's more than one math class. So I just think that we could use a little relief at the high schools. We would have to trade that off against something else, and I think that the board just needs to know what the other things we could be trading that off for. If we start cutting really deep, we're going to start talking about the trade-off between enrichment and class size, because that's what we're going to be down to. So I don't want that to be a surprise to people that we might end up having that discussion. I have to say that we did hear from the community last time that enrichment and choice was their most important priority. That might not still be the case, but I think it's important for people to know that was the most important thing last time. I also think that we need to be careful. I remember being at a company where they started talking about everybody got this many pencils. And if we start getting into a culture like that, it's going to be very hard to work here. So this goes back to my peanut butter point. let's be really, make our choices really cleanly and don't put people in a position where they have to do the same amount of work with significantly less resources. We need to change the work if that's what we need to do.
I have a card from a community member who's spoken before. I'm not going to take that card because we're at the end, even though in a study session we might typically enable that because we're less formal. Are there any other comments from board members that you would like to make? I'd like to give Dr. McGee an opportunity. If not,
Can I just ask that that community member send your comments to us in writing? Thank you.
thank you. And thanks, I'd like to thank all the community members who've spoken for your contributions. The study sessions are valuable in large part because of your participation, so thank you for coming out.
Great. Well, thank you. It's certainly been illuminating, to say the least. And I think in addition to looking at administrators and clerical per thousand we start, we need to look at instructional assistants. We need to look at teachers per thousand. So that's if we're going to use that metric, I think that's probably something we should do across the board. So we will follow the board's direction on this. I appreciate the input. I really appreciate the compelling case made by the community as well. So we look forward to returning for February 28th for our second interim report and a budget workshop on or about March 7th. We need to do a few scheduling shifts if we have something that day, but we're good to go.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.